call to order at 2:02 PM, March 16th, 2023. Do I need to read the notice
Yes, ma'am.
on the
if you
top
don't
of the
mind.
agenda? Would you like the whole, all three paragraphs?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right.
Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry, just, no, we don't need that. Let's see if you have it, is it up there? Sometimes there's a little sheet up here. No, we'll just get right into, yeah. Yes, this introduction here,
Okay, that's what you want.
and then we'll get right into pledge of allegiance. So, thank you.
I was wondering where that was.
It was still in mine, so.
Okay, thanks. Okay. The ZBA is a fact-finding body, and to grant variances, it must determine the existence of special conditions other than solely financial, which create an undue hardship for the applicant. Positive action requires an affirmative vote by at least 4 of the 5 members. ZBA decisions are final, and recourse from ZBA decisions is to a court of law. For items scheduled for a public hearing, residents will have the opportunity to comment on agenda items. In accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, members of the board shall not discuss, deliberate, or make any decisions on topics not posted as an agenda item. Speakers should state their name and full address for the record and address all remarks to the board. The board asks the public remarks to be limited to no more than 3 minutes. And if you'll all stand, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Chairwoman, at this time, I would like to point out just some errors on the staff report that we want to correct for the record.
Sure.
I believe that on your agenda, under regular item number 4, public hearing, it says that the request has been submitted by DW Clarkland Investments. That's actually Tim Batters. And I think that was the only correction I wanted. I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Noted, and that's under the item subject public hearing section.
Yes, 5A.
Thank you. Okay. So board will look over the minutes from the previous meeting, and I'll entertain a motion for approval. And that'll be the third page. Okay, I have a motion from Ms. Ward. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion? None? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to our public hearing items. And we are ready for our staff report.
Chairwoman, if you would, please just briefly read the agenda caption for that item.
Okay, the consider of a request. Okay, thank you. Public hearing to consider a request for variance to the zoning ordinance section 118-427A for a reduction in the minimum lot width requirements for a proposed subdivision of Lot 2, City Block 68 of the Wilson and Baker subdivision located at 4401 North Street. This request has been submitted by correction Tim Batters Realty ZBA 2023-01.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Elena Helton, City Planner. As stated, the specific request that's before you today is for a variance, and this is from the literal enforcement of the zoning ordinance, which may be requested whenever owing to an exceptional or extraordinary condition, that the literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in some sort of a necessary hardship of development of the property. So the subject property is around 5.3 acres. It's located along the west side of North Street, just south of Creek Bend Boulevard. This property was developed back in the late 60s with an office building on the east side of it, fronting North Street, and then Capri Apartments on the back side or towards the west end of the property. Whenever it was developed with a single point of access, a shared driveway. It's been functioning like that since the 60s. Shortly after the property was developed and Hobby Lobby was developed on the south side, there was an access easement that was dedicated and then expanded to allow for shared use for the property and the property to the south. It's encouraged to consolidate or share access drives, especially along busy commercial corridors such as North Street, in order to limit traffic conflicts and just create a safer environment. So anytime we can limit driveways along a busy commercial corridor is a plus. So just some background information on that. So the image that you see on the top of the screen, that's the original plat as it stands today. You can kind of see the outline of some of those apartment buildings. Again, it's 5.3 acres, and you can actually see the little outline of the easement, and we'll get into that more in just a minute. But the applicant essentially wants to subdivide the property and separate the office use that's located right up front on North Street from the apartments to the rear of the property. The applicant would like to sell off at least a piece of it and maintain the office. So in order to do that, they have to create a new lot and physically separate those two. And so the access easement would stay in place. They're actually proposing to expand that access easement. But the reason you're hearing a variance is because the lot dimensions, such as lot width, depth, and area, are outlined in our zoning ordinance, and it's based on whatever the zoning district is in place on your property. So in this case, the property is zoned commercial, B2 general business. And this zoning district requires a minimum 50-foot lot width, so that's the actual width of the lot as it touches the public street. It's got a lot depth minimum of 100 feet and lot area of 5,000 square feet. So the two lots that are proposed meet all of the standards except for lot 2R. That's that lot in the back where the Capri apartments are. Instead of providing the 50-foot minimum frontage, they're proposing to just eliminate that altogether and allow the access easement to satisfy that requirement because it's already functioning in that way today. There's actually a paved driveway. And it is a public access easement, so it does allow for not just the private residents, but also fire, police, all of those entities are able to access the property. And this is actually common in kind of mixed-use commercial districts for you to have a shared access easement instead of having completely new public streets separating property. So the purpose of the minimum lot dimensions includes creating orderly, predictable, and efficient development, also safeguarding and enhancing property values, protecting public and private investment, and allowing for adequate spacing between buildings and emergency access. Staff finds that with the provision of the access easement and expanding it, that'll be more than adequate for emergency access and to serve the purpose of the lot width dimension, at least to allow for general access to the property. These are just some images of the property. You'll see in the front, that's that new construction of the sidewalks that are going in along North Street, but that is the office building as you're standing on the other side of the street. These are images of the actual apartments that are just behind the office building. And so you can see these are, again, these were built back in the 60s. I think they've been updated a couple times, but they are still very much in that era. This is just an image of the actual driveway. So that's that driveway that the access easement follows. On the upper left-hand corner, that's if you're standing on the other side of North Street. And on the lower right-hand corner, that's if you're actually standing in the apartment complex parking lot and then looking out. So again, there's already a 30-foot public access easement there today that's serving the subject property in the lot to the south. The applicant is actually proposing to expand that access easement to 50 feet, which is the minimum lot width for B2 general business. The property will continue to function as it has been with that shared driveway and access easement. So staff finds that the change doesn't actually modify or impact the way that the property functions today. So as part of the variance process, we notify all property owners within 200 feet. We did not get any responses in support or in opposition. So we don't anticipate this is going to negatively impact the adjacent properties, as most of them are already developed. And essentially, the subdivision isn't for creating a new lot for development. It's just separating two existing uses. Staff finds that the request does meet the conditions for approval, and we're actually looking at, in response to the request, looking at amending our zoning ordinance to allow this type of thing by right. I think it's appropriate for commercial and multifamily, not so much for single family, because those really are individual properties that aren't intended to be accessed by the general public. And so we're looking at actually making changes so we don't have to keep bringing these types of variances to you guys in the future, because it just makes sense. If the board would like to get into the different criteria in the staff report, we can do that, but we just wanted to have it on the screen here in case you had any questions. And again, this is just the final exhibit. We put some color on there to kind of highlight the different property lines in the easement. Mr. Tim Batters is here if the board should have any questions. And with that, I'll conclude our presentation and open it up for questions from the board.
Thank you, Elena. Any questions from the board?
I just want to make sure that we're okay with the buildings that are right close to the property line, that, do they fulfill the setback, or are we gonna be having to come back, having to grant a variance if he were to sell this, because this building is not, you know, the building that's on the north,
Yes.
looks like the north, corner there.
Yes, so the side setbacks for B2 are 0 or 2 or 10 feet, depending on the proximity of the buildings on the other side of the street. The rear setback is 10, so that one meets. The applicant has stated that they do intend to remove that closest building that's on Lot 2R that you see, so that'll be going away. So
Okay.
there shouldn't be any kind of building encroachments as a result of the subdivision.
That's the only thing I thought of. I didn't want us
Okay.
to, whoever he sells it to, come back later and need that.
Yeah, no, that's a
Right.
great question. That was something that we walked through.
What is the status of Parmley Street? Is it a private drive or?
I'm not entirely sure. Steve, do you know?
I don't know, I'll look at it. I don't know, I believe it is.
We're finding out for you.
Okay.
Is that what that was called in? At some point? Was
Down the
Parmley
side.
I'm
Street?
wondering if Parmley Drive is a city street, then it does have 50 feet of frontage.
Well, so I know that where the access easement follows,
Right.
it is private. It's
It is
an access easement.
So Parmley Drive doesn't start till later?
Well, sometimes you have private drives that are named as streets for
Right.
addressing purposes, probably for the apartments in the back. So that's not an uncommon scenario. So just because it's named doesn't necessarily mean it's a public street. It can still be private. Steve, were you able to verify?
Yeah, I'm looking.
Okay. It didn't show up on our GIS whenever we were looking at the property as right-of-way, and then the easement did call it out as private, so I think it's just one of those named private driveways, and we've got a couple of those, especially for
Yeah, 'cause I
commercial.
didn't realize it's coming up on like maps, streets, it is Parmley Drive.
Yeah, and that's for,
All the way to North Street.
that's for emergency personnel, you know, emergency response,
Okay.
mail, post office, things like that.
What is the address, Tim, of the Capri Apartments? Is it 4410 North or is it Parmley Drive?
Well, it's 4401 North Street, but the apartments are listed as Parmley Drive. 208, 206, 212, each building.
So how do they get their mail?
Parmley Drive.
Okay.
And it's named after Miss Helen Parmley, who used to own that property. And as far as I'm almost positive it's a private street. Or I say private. I own from the south corner of this red marker here up to the corner of Hobby Lobby, all of that front, and then from the corner of Hobby Lobby down through that way, Vines or whoever owns the Hobby Lobby property owns that strip of land as far as the easements are concerned. The easement ownership.
So the Parmley Drive is on the Hobby Lobby
That's what they're calling Parmley
property.
Drive.
And those three buildings, those three duplexes that are up in the front, that the line goes through, there's a high line that goes over them, kind of on the side of them. It's written in the deed here that if anything happens to those three buildings, which in 1977, it was stated that they were poor and dilapidated condition, and they'll probably be torn down in the near future. And that's 50 years later, and we're still renting them really nice. We fix them up, but if anything happens to those buildings, if they get burned or the new buyer decides to take them down, he cannot build back where that red line is. That's gonna be the new open easement through there.
So those three buildings are grandfathered in at this
Yes,
point?
ma'am.
Okay.
And so that'll just be a wider, in the future, that'll just be a wider opening through there. And for, just for comments sake, the buildings that are on the side, the other apartment buildings, one of them, the corner of it is right on the
I
easement
see that.
line.
Yeah.
The next one, the next two-story building, but the next ones are right on the edge of it. And I would feel safe to bet that if anyone later in the future wanted to tear those down and do something with that property, they're not gonna put something right on close to that line. It's gonna be a wider easement through there too, for that property. I would be safe to bet.
Yeah.
It would be smart to do that, not just put it like it.
Able to, would
But it's like that because they were there, and then Walmart sold, Smith sold the land to Walmart before Hobby Lobby, and they needed an easement to get to the back, so it was sold and done that way because, you know, they had the building, well, maybe the building wasn't there then, but anyway, that's how they delegated it back then.
Yeah. Everything was built back in the 60s, and then the easement was dedicated afterwards. But there was language in there that conditioned reconstruction of those buildings where you have a conflict.
How wide is that little narrow part right there that goes all the way from the little crook all the way back? Because if this is 50 feet,
Yeah,
what is that?
it's about 20 feet.
Okay.
So, and obviously I didn't go do title work, but city records show no right-of-way there. And appraisal district does not show any parcels a lot. Most of the time they'll pick up right-of-ways or parcel lines. So we show neither one here in the data that I've got.
Okay. Okay, are there any other questions from the board? For Elaine? Okay. Mr. Batters? Would you like to speak?
Come up there.
Should have had you come up before and speak, I'm sorry.
You did all the work for me. I lost a week's sleep trying to get all this prepared. And you did it. Hats off to you. First of all, I want to say that this is my first time to ever deal with something like this. I've been taking care of those apartments for over 50 years, since 1977. But Juan and Miss Elaine have been very, very nice in dealing with them and trying to get to a conclusion on this, and I appreciate it. The 6 points that I think that we're looking at here is, it says such variance will not substantially or permanently injure the appropriate use of adjacent property in the same district, and I don't think that'll happen. And such variance will not adversely affect the health, safety, or general welfare of the public. I don't think that will. Such variance will not authorize the operation of a use other than the uses specifically authorized for the district in which the property for that variance is sought and located. And that, we're keeping it just like it's been for 50 years. And the variance is not self-created hardship. And it's like we said, it's been like this for years and years and years. But, Elena, I thought, I was kind of under the understanding that we were the opening on North Street is 50 feet. And then it goes to 37 feet. Once you get up on top of the grade, it goes to 37, which the easement part is. And I thought we were just gonna do a 20-foot back line of 50 feet, instead of going 50 feet all the way up on the, I thought we were gonna do a back set.
Yeah, so this is the plat exhibit that Tommy sent me. It just shows the 50 feet on Lot 1R, so that's just the easement line, but it doesn't go past that. It stops at where Lot 2R is showing.
Right.
So that was what Tommy sent me, based on our discussions, because the 50 feet matched the lot width requirement. But the ZBA can approve the variance, reducing that from 50 feet to 40 feet or something of that nature, as long as it still covered the driveway. I think that would be the condition that we would ask for. If you're speaking to like wanting it to be smaller.
Yes, what the ideal situation would be is, we need a 50-foot opening on North Street, and then if we need some more 50-foot area, we can come back set 20 feet. But then, I know that grade goes up on the side of Hobby Lobby parking lot. I know it goes up, but it's 37 feet wide now. It's plenty wide to go 2 cars or emergency vehicles, whatever to get. But once you get to the property that I'm selling, it's wide open from there. And then, of course, like we addressed, the buildings on the back line are going to be adjusted however to get the 10-foot. And the back line is not in stone now. This is just what Tommy and I kind of came up with. If the buyer of the apartments wants a little bit more of the front in order to accommodate the sale, to make it worthwhile, I can come back or whatever. But it's wide open once you get to the apartments. It's wide open. And then future development on the front lot will be to the point that now I want to keep Michelle Dieter there. She's renting it and has been a good tenant, and then rent the other side of the office if we decide not to use that part. But the main thing is that if we decide in the future to tear the office down and to do some kind of little development there, then that dirt will be, next door terrific teachers are doing some work and putting a little shopping center in there. They're gonna have a smoothie shop and some retail spaces. And they have cut the grade down probably 3 feet, 2 feet off my property. Because my property is high, it comes up and then it slopes back. to the creek back there. It's great drainage, but, what I would do in the future is cut that down a couple feet to kind of blend in with terrific teachers. So that basically all of that over beside there would be parking, drive-in or whatever, so
Yeah.
it would all be open.
Yeah, so, that shouldn't be affected by the variance at all. So we're kind of getting into the weeds about future
Yeah.
possible changes, but the variance wouldn't affect your ability to do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Thank
All
you.
right, you're welcome.
Okay, so just to clarify, our variance is just for the 50-foot easement on Lot 1R.
So the variance is for lot width to lot 2R, because lot 2R doesn't physically have that street frontage. So they're proposing the access easement to satisfy that. And so the variance request is to allow a reduction in lot width from 50 to 0 feet for lot 2R with the condition that the access easement stay in place.
Remain as
Yes, ma'am.
presented. Understood, okay.
So when he sells this, the field notes then will be for lot 2R, and then, because this is gonna have to be described in meets and bounds, this 50 acres, then the reduction, so are we
50-foot.
50 foot,
50
and
foot.
then it's gonna be reduced to 30 feet or 37, and then it drops back down to?
It's going to be
20
reduced to
feet.
0.
So
No,
the,
This
Right.
access easement's gonna need to be
Oh, right,
in the
right.
deed, whoever buys this
Yeah.
is gonna need this literally described.
yeah,
Right.
so the access easement that's there today is already described in the deed and the original survey. The only change that's being done with this is expanding that access easement just for the piece where the office building is going to be, that lot 1R, just increasing that, that's the only change. It won't actually affect the acreage of the property, because the easement is just a tool that allows someone else to use your property for something other than, for either access or utilities or something. It doesn't actually change the size or reduce the size of your lot. It's just a legal permission to cross the property.
Sure.
So there shouldn't be any additional changes
So
or,
who owns if he sells the apartments, then he'll be selling that access easement and Hobby Lobby then, or does Hobby Lobby own that?
so the easement runs with the property. It doesn't matter who owns it. Whoever owns it at that time has access to that easement. So regardless if the ownership changes, whoever owns it at the time will still be able to benefit from that easement. So just because I sell it to Sarah, that doesn't mean that I no longer am able to use that easement. She just owns the property underneath it now. So, does that make sense?
Well, I thought there was different easements in there, George, like prescriptive and this, where you can limit an easement.
There are some like that, but I don't think that would apply here. And it looks like I assume you're doing another plat on this, actually gonna be a plat. So it'll be a public record with that 50-foot, how it is here.
And it would run with the land.
This is just the exhibit, it's a preliminary plan, so we will file an actual subdivision plat that'll outline the boundaries of that easement and the access. So this is just a strictly access easement.
So are we amending the request that starts at 50 feet on North Street, and then where the easement joins lot 2R, it goes down to 37? Is that right?
So the way that I would word the motion is to approve a variance to lot width for lot 2R with the condition that the public access easement on lot 1R stay in place. So basically, that lot 1R easement is granting that access through to North Street. So, yeah, the variance is lot width to lot 2R with the condition that access easement be maintained on lot 1R.
And the current access easement on Lot 1R is 50-foot currently? Or we're requesting an extension of that access easement and then also the lot width variance?
The
This
easement
is a twofold thing, I guess is what I'm
Yeah,
asking.
the easement today is 30 feet. They're proposing it, expand it to 50, but all you have to say is, access easement as presented. So we're presenting it as 50 feet, so
Understood.
we can just state it that way.
Okay.
I
Yes,
thought
ma'am.
Mr. Batters just asked for it to be 30 feet.
Well,
Are you sure it's 30?
He's-
It's 37.
I think he's talking about the reduction at 2R, not the 50-foot.
Not this one, okay.
So,
It sounded like he was
Talking about reducing.
about right here, wanting this to
Yeah.
just be 30 feet.
No, like 50 here and then reducing it down about right there.
Oh, he wants it 50
That's
right
what I
off
was
North
hearing,
Street,
but-
and
Mr.
then,
Batters, would you mind coming up and explaining, please? Is he looking at the same image we're looking at?
Yes.
Okay, so when you were talking about the reduction to 37 feet, where were you,
Well, I was just going from
Thinking
the,
of that.
from the curb on the office side of the property to the curb on the Hobby Lobby side. It's 37 feet.
So the actual driveway width is 37 feet, but the easement is larger than that to allow for maintenance of that easement. So you have the actual driveway pavement width, curb to curb,
okay,
37 feet. Easement goes out more than that to allow room to go in and maintain and repair and keep that area in working order. So while the pavement is 37, the easement straddles that even further. Does that make sense?
understood. So Mr. Butters understands that they're talking about a 50-foot access easement from North Street all the way to the start of Lot 2R. Correct, sir?
We're not talking about a 50-foot opening.
No.
50-foot
No,
back set,
it-
20 feet back set, 50 feet, and then letting it go back to the original easement?
Yeah, so the 50 feet would stop at Lot 2R, and this is just the easement. It's not a new driveway or pavement. It just allows more flexibility so if the driveway needs to shift.
I mean on 1R, at the beginning of North Street.
Mm-hmm.
I thought we were going 50 feet where the opening is now, and then go 50 feet, 20 feet back set, and then let it go to the original easement.
So we talked about that as an option, and then this is and then based on those conversations, we communicated that to Tommy, and then Tommy has sent us this exhibit. So we assumed that you were in communication with Tommy and you'd reconciled that. But either way, it doesn't affect the driveway. Driveway's still gonna be in the same place, still gonna be the same width. It's just expanding that access easement to allow for more flexibility for it to move. And we picked the 50 feet because the 50 feet is the minimum lot width. So I think we're getting kind of caught up in the minutia of the details. But if Tim would like to have that easement reduced to 40 feet or, reduced to 30 as it goes back, we can write that in to the motion and just have Tommy correct it before we file the plat.
Okay, Mr. Butters?
That would be good. As far as, I want plenty of easement area, I want plenty of easement. I wouldn't want to sell the property and it not be viable for them in the future. But I just didn't want to have an extra wide easement for them when it's not really
Necessary.
Necessary?
when it's been plenty wide for big trucks, two big trucks to go through, or whatever, vans and stuff to go through. Now, I admit the part from the apartments back is narrow, but that's just the way that is. But when like I said, when in the future, if they're moved and changed, then that'll be wider there.
I think the,
We're not talking about that.
yeah, I think that's a little moot point right now, yeah. But, however, now that I'm looking at this again, it does look like where Lot 1R hits Lot 2R, that the red dotted line is reducing down right at that lot. Do you see that? Are you also observing that?
Yeah, so see.
I think we're good with what.
How this is presented with 50 feet from North Street all the way to the boundary line, and then a reduction right at the boundary line of Lot 1R and Lot 2R?
I'm sorry.
Okay, sure. Just want to make sure everybody's on the same page here.
Yes, thank you for allowing us to clarify.
Okay. Any clarifying questions from the board?
But just one question, not necessarily a question, but clarification. This variance is for the frontage on Lot 2R, not the 50-foot easement.
Correct. The easement is being proposed to satisfy the access, but it already has access, but essentially to allow for a larger easement if it needed to be in the
For
future.
administrative plat purposes, being 50 feet wide, it now qualifies.
Yes, correct.
Otherwise,
Wait.
it would be landlocked.
Is the easement 50 foot? No, we're approving it as 50 feet right now, as the request is to approve the easement to expand it to 50 feet, plus reduce the minimum lot width to Lot 2R. So it is a twofold thing, and I think that was my question earlier as well.
Well, what I'm driving at, though, is with it being 50 feet, it's a legal lot. And so an administrative plat would take care of that. But if it's less than 50 feet, then a variance would have to be granted.
Well, an access easement is
right now,
different
though.
because right now, the way our ordinance reads is you have to have physical frontage, which means your property lines,
Right.
your property boundary has to have 50 feet touching the street frontage. An easement those aren't property lines, that's just a permission granted for the property. So Technically, it's still not physically touching North Street, which is why they're seeking the variance, because it's supposed to be 50, well, it's essentially 0. But the access easement is helping facilitate and maintain that open access, so it's not essentially landlocked. I hope-
Your proposal is to expand this easement from 30-foot to 50-foot, almost because it accommodates that 0 frontage by expanding from 30 feet to 50 feet, which matches the original intention of the ordinance.
Yes, thank you. You said that much more eloquently, thank
Okay.
you.
Gotcha. Okay. Does that make sense, Ed? Okay. And it is 30 feet currently?
It is.
Okay, okay. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions from the board? Clarify question? None? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion that the variance be granted as presented.
That works.
I have a motion to approve the variance as presented. And do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any additional discussion or any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? And opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. Okay. And do we have anything else for the agenda?
No, ma'am.
All right. Then we will adjourn at 2:34 PM.